Welcome to the region's only public safety talk show. It's time again for the Sheriff's Report, your weekly report from Spokane County Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich. Sheriff's Report covers a variety of public issues in Spokane County and is now in its fourth year on the air. Sheriff's Report is sponsored by River Ridge Hardware. Now, here's your host, Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich.
Well, good morning. This is Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich with the Sheriff's Report. Some of you may be listening to this through podcast, and some will be listening to it over the radio. I have a really interesting show today. I think that this might be one of the better topics that we've had in quite a long time. Because in studio with me, I have a very dear friend that really went through something amazing last summer, and we'll get into that. But before we go much further, Todd, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to everybody, kind of give them a little bit of a background of who you are, and we'll go from there.
Sure, yeah, my name is Todd Eklof. I'm the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane. I've been in Spokane for about 9 years now. I moved here from Louisville, Kentucky, where I'd lived for 25 years and had a career both as a Unitarian Universalist minister as well as a career in television news and corporate video production for a while. And I'm originally born in San Francisco and went to college at a little Southern Baptist college in Texas to study ministry, and ended up going to Louisville after I graduated to continue my seminary education at a Southern Baptist seminary. So I came from a very rather conservative religion and moved into a very liberal religion, and I think I speak both languages fairly well, even though I would consider myself a liberal or progressive. I certainly have a heart for a lot of the more conservative people I've known and continue to relate to over the years, and we get along well because once we get past some of the differences, we find out that our concerns are essentially the same, and I think that's why you and I can call each other friends despite having differences of opinions on a variety of subjects. And it's almost embarrassing to me that we have to say, oh, just because we disagree doesn't mean we're not friends. It's sad that we live in a society where we have to qualify friendships by saying we don't always agree on everything. What kind of friendship is it that you have to agree on everything?
You know, I'm glad you said that, because it is one of the most amazing conversation starters, or I mean, people I've known for years and years and years. I mean, they open up with, well, you know, we don't always. I'm like, okay, why do we have to point that out?
Yeah,
I think you know me. By now, I know you by now. I know. Why do we have to go there? Why do we have to point out our differences before we can even think about going to our common shared values? Because I look at people and go, you'd be surprised how close many of our values probably line up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are we going to be 100% here? No, we're not. But if you really sit down and talk to me, I think you'd find that we have a lot more in common than you may actually ever realize, because you can't get out past that first opening conversation piece. We're different.
Mm-hmm.
And we put the roadblocks up.
Yeah.
We put the walls up at that point. You know, you and I have sat on opposite ends of many, many issues.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have debated points. We attend a group that takes great pleasure in rationally discussing issues from all points of views. But we always have to, for some reason, go back to, well, we're different.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what is hurting the country right now. You know, President Washington, in his farewell address, said, beware of the party system, it will destroy America. Well, guess what? I think pretty prophetic words at that point. He was pretty much spot on, because we now highlight our differences rather than realizing that we are Americans first. We have commonality across the board. Okay, yeah, we may have different political pitches here or there, but we all want the best for our society. One of the last summer, and folks, I'm just going to phrase it this way. Last summer, I was sitting at the kitchen table in the morning, and I looked at the newspaper, and on the front page, I saw an article about my dear friend Todd. And I started reading, and next thing I know, I'm almost choking on my Cheerios, because in this article, they were calling you a racist. As a matter of fact, that may have been some of the kinder things that they said about you. And I was like, how does an individual that has devoted his life to end such practices think, hate, end up getting labeled a racist by your own friends, by the very people that, I mean, those were your peeps.
Yeah.
Why don't you kind of give us a little bit of how that happened? How did we get to the point where somebody that, and folks, I know this man. He has fought that label, or the evil behind that label, all his life. But then to have to wear it, I was incensed. It wasn't just anger. I was incensed, and we'll get to it maybe a little bit deeper into the show. But we ran into each other at a mutual event on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And I'll talk a little bit about that. But Todd, how? Folks, this is the book that got him. This book right here got him. Why don't you kind of give an idea of how? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, it really started several years ago when I noticed something that's going on all over our country right now, this tendency to try to shut down conversation and divide people into groups and camps started impacting my religion. At least that's my interpretation of the events. And it, for me, I really boil the values of Unitarian Universalism down to reason, freedom of conscience, and uplifting our common humanity.
Freedom of thought.
Freedom of thought, yeah. And that, the reason that you and I get along without question has nothing to do with whether or not we have the same ideas or different ideas. It's because we operate from a common humanity ethic. We understand that there is more between us that is alike than is dislike, and that if we really consider our, the human species is such an amazing species in that regard, because unlike most species, we are more genetically similar. Our line was so narrow at some point that we're all so deeply related as to be almost brothers and sisters. So that term is apropos when we call each other brothers and sisters. And some of us go through life and recognize that we're one species, we're one being, we're one fam, we're part of one human family. And if that's the starting place, then the divisions don't really make a lot of difference.
No, and for those that are religious, one God. We share many, many things. One Savior. And the human family tends to forget certain aspects. If you really take a look at, 3 of the top 5 religions, all come from one root. And I think they really forget that at points. They forget that there was one root that started all of that and they just branched. So I really, like I said, really was surprised about what had happened. But what inside that pesky little book?
What caused the problem?
What caused it?
Well, real quickly, I'll just say Morihei Ueshiba, who is the founder of Aikido, the Way of Harmony, used to say that there are many paths leading to the top of Mount Fuji, but there was only one summit, love. Yeah. It's a beautiful way to say what you just said. Yeah, so I was really wanting to question, it is a book of dissent. It's called The Gadfly Papers, 3 Inconvenient Essays by One Pesky Minister. So I was intending to stir up a controversy and conversation. I didn't realize it would happen so quickly. It really...
Because it was pretty much instantaneous.
It was instantaneous. The article that you referred to in the local paper was in reference to a letter that at the time 300 of my colleagues had signed less than 24 hours after I started giving the book away. And then eventually over 500 of my colleagues have signed that letter.
So they must have really taken a good deep dive in that
a big
24
deep dive
hours.
In it. That's been one of the criticisms. In fact, some of them have said, don't read that. We didn't read it, and we encourage you not to read it. So it was obviously a threatening piece, because it was a book of dissent. And the letter accused me of being racist, homophobic, transphobic, ableist, these kind of things. It cited oddly enough, logic as being a classic form of white supremacy.
Now, folks, I want you to listen closely to what Todd just said. Logic is a classic form of white supremacy. And Todd, just kind of back up just a little in that, in some of the things that they mentioned and called you. Can you define their definition of racist? Because I've always wanted to ask that question. Mm-hmm. What is their definition of racist? If logic is white supremacism, what exactly is a racist in their view?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish I could define it, because I don't understand it, and I think because one of my essays is really about logic, the application of logic. That was one piece of evidence to point to, suggesting the accusation was valid. Now, I think there is some validity to saying that logic has been used to justify racism and all manner of injustice over the years. It may be poor logic or unsound logic, but logic has been used in that way. But that in and of itself is a logical fallacy, right? It's what we call affirming the consequence. So if I were to say, for example, all rainbows have the color purple, the bouquet has the color purple, therefore the bouquet is a rainbow, you understand the fallacy, right? So logic in and of itself is not racism or white supremacy. It is a tool, like many tools that have been used for justifying people's injustice. So I will acknowledge that it can be used in that case, but to say that logic blanket is a form of white supremacy prohibits us from speaking reasonably to each other.
It actually prevents us from even speaking to each other.
If you can't use reasons, then we might as well just be stream of consciousness.
You and I talked, and you threw a few words out at me. Safetyism, woke culture, mm-hmm. The call-out culture, which we see used very effective on both the left and the right, mm-hmm. actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is, for folks that are going, okay, safetyism, what is that?
Yeah.
What is safetyism? I think I understand, but I'm not going to take that leap.
Well, in 2018, Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt came out with a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, which is where I first learned this term safetyism. I believe they coined the term. And so to understand what they mean by safetyism, you first have to understand the idea of concept creep. Concept creep is a term they use where you take something that we once understood to mean one thing and then start to expand it out to mean other things. So safety.
Like logic.
Like logic, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things it's used for, but safety has often, most often thought of as being physically safe from harm, from physical harm, safe from being abused, safe from any kind of harassment, things that many of the laws that are in place are meant to protect us from.
Would it mean basically then the concept of safe places on college campus and things that?
Safe. I think having safe places on college campuses is a manifestation of. So the concept creep of safetyism, according to Hayton Lukianoff, is that safety now means not having to hear things that we disagree with, because hearing things we disagree with hurt our feelings. And so it is now our moral obligation to protect the feelings of one another by not saying things or allowing things to be said that might hurt somebody's feelings. And so when they talk about safetyism, that's what they're talking about. They open their book with a wonderful analogy of the rise in peanut allergies that are going on in the country. And I've actually confirmed this through some independent research, but the general understanding of why we're seeing this allergy rise is because in response to protecting those with peanut allergies, we're removing peanuts from the environment, and therefore our bodies are not able to adapt to that and recognize it as an allergen because it's something they're not accustomed to. In fact, the way to treat allergies, of course, is small exposures. So we're basically trying to clean up the environment from anything that might harm somebody.
Which they've found is actually devastating to us.
It is devastating to us. The current research on longevity and health really requires us to open our bodies to stress. We want to get the stress complex activated, and what that does is it releases chemicals in our body that then start to repair the body. And if we're not stressed, the repair mechanisms aren't working, and our DNA just starts to age and fray, and we start to get older and sicker for no good reason. But one technique is to lower our body temperature, to actually take a walk in the cold this time of year, to have intermittent fasting where we're hungry, basically telling our body we're in danger, and that makes us truly, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. So that's the mindset that a lot of us have grown up with and believe in, and safetyism is a different mindset. And I think in fairness to the evolution of society, we should understand that we do change, the line does change, what is appropriate and what isn't, and it should. I mean, gosh, when I was growing up, it was perfectly appropriate to tell Polish jokes and to tell dumb blonde jokes. And these were funny. Nobody thought about them hurting anybody's feelings or being bad. They were just funny jokes. That was the group you picked on. I was a little kid. I grew up with them. I didn't even know what Polish meant. I just knew it was the brunt of the joke. And thank goodness we've grown past that. That a group became more sensitive and said, wait a minute, that's not funny. Humor requires a benign violation. It's not funny if it doesn't violate some cultural taboo, but it has to violate in a way that nobody gets hurt, right? That was the great thing about the Three Stooges. They could get, hit over the head with a hammer, but they didn't get hurt, so we could laugh. Now, if their heads cracked open and we saw gore coming out, it wouldn't be funny. Right. And chicken and the egg is not or chicken crossing the road is not a funny joke because it doesn't violate any kind of taboo. So there's a tension there, and I think as my generation grows older, we do get out of touch with emerging, changing values of where that line is drawn, and that's something we have to be prepared for. But at the same time, when we're talking about violating core values that are universal perennial values like freedom of conscience that a lot of people have fought for and struggled for throughout human history, that's not a blurry line there to me. That's something that I think we need to keep in place, and the freedom to express ourselves and to dialogue openly, and to embrace our common humanity. So right now the safetyism is the idea that it's a mechanism for shutting down conversation by saying,
I'm offended.
I'm offended.
I tell you, I have lost count of the number of times that word is used anytime somebody doesn't want to hear what another person's saying. I'm offended. Me being me, I just look at them and go, that's nice. You can be offended.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to deal with the harsh realities here. You can be offended all you want, but how are we going to fix the problem? You might not want to hear what I have said, but that doesn't lessen the validity of what was said.
Yeah.
And college campuses at one point used to be a place where free flow of thought, ideas were really, really taken to heart. I'm afraid that, the Age of Enlightenment would never happen under these current conditions, ever.
No.
And because you can't even talk about anything of substance, especially if people don't, I'm going to be offended. You mentioned a few more words, woke. I know there's a lot of people out there probably going, woke. I mean, well, what's woke?
Yeah. So this phenomenon, whether you call it safetyism, the woke, the call-out culture, the cancel culture, the terms keep changing. I think we're all still trying to figure out how to kind of define and talk about and frame what's going on. But the woke seems to be a term that is self-applied by those who have adopted this philosophy, that they feel that they are enlightened, that they are awake, that they have woken up to a new truth, and now the rest of us are asleep, those of us who don't buy into it. And so there's to me, it has a tone of superiority, in it. I can't remember what politician came out who was running for, one of the many people running for the Democratic presidential nomination, said, I'm glad we're the party of the woke, but we need to be the party of the still waking too. And I felt, insulted by that, because I like to think I'm a pretty enlightened guy myself. I don't really want to wake up to that. I call it sleepwalking myself. But that's just another term that folks use for this phenomenon. The call-out culture, of course, is fairly self-evident. We a lot of us experience that. You say something someone disagrees with, and then suddenly you're embarrassed and punished publicly for saying something.
It is basically going back to the old philosophy of a public flogging.
A public flogging, yeah.
Pillaring.
Yeah.
The whole, it just not being done physically, it's being done emotionally. Mm-hmm. It's being done character-wise, character assassination.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
I've had people hit me. Again, the term racist, when I heard it thrown at you, I went, well, I've been there. They've tried to throw that label on me for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. The danger of that, the danger of this woke or this safetyism is the fact that they aren't awake. They are putting their minds to sleep. They are closing off the very thing that makes humans grow, and that is new ideas, mm-hmm. new perceptions.
Being stretched and challenged.
Yes.
And hearing things we might disagree with so that we can double check that we're in a firm place.
We have about 2 minutes left in this segment. Folks, we're going to do 2 segments today. And in the next one, we're going to talk a little bit about groupthink. How all of this safetyism, wokeism, call-out culture, punishment culture is what I call it,
Yeah.
has led to a very dangerous level of groupthink, which has never turned out well in society.
No.
It
We
leads
don't want
to
that. We don't
books
want
being
that.
burned.
Yeah.
I bet you they would have probably burned your book.
Burned and banned. Yeah.
Yes, and we're also going to talk about something, a concept you brought up that was just made me actually step back after we had breakfast the other day and go, the Bolshevik Revolution. I think you got something there. So, folks, here very shortly we will reboot, and we'll be right back. We have some viewers as far away as Colorado, I understand, today. So if you're out there, a salute to my daughter, Jessica. She's a deputy sheriff in Grand County, Colorado. And I hope that FTO program's going well for you.
Thanks for watching. Sheriff's Report is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksMedia.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Sheriff's Report is sponsored by River Ridge Hardware. Ask Ozzie a question, recommend a guest, or hear this program again on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SpokaneTalksMedia.com.
This is River Ridge Frame Shop, called Frame It Today, where we can take your art, customize it, and get it ready to hang on the wall. Here at River Ridge Hardware, 2803 West Garland.